Lily woke just after 7, before the sun had fully lifted over the maple trees. I heard her stirring before I saw her. The soft rustle of the quilt. The careful click of her suitcase zipper. The small, guilty sounds of a child trying not to be a burden in the very place she had come to escape that word. I was at the stove making scrambled eggs and toast, the same breakfast I used to make when she stayed overnight as a little girl. Back then, she would sit on the counter even after I told her not to, swinging her legs and stealing strawberries from the bowl. That morning, she stood at the kitchen doorway like a guest waiting for permission. Her hair was still damp at the ends from the rain, and her face looked older than 16 should ever look. "I can leave after breakfast," she said quietly. "I just did not know where else to go last night." I turned off the burner and set the spatula down. "You are not in trouble for coming here." She nodded, but the nod did not reach her eyes. We ate at the small breakfast table by the window, the one Richard had built when Mark was still in high school. Lily pushed her eggs around with her fork for several minutes before she finally spoke. I was not supposed to hear them. Her voice was flat, controlled, as if she had practiced saying it without shaking. Mom thought I was upstairs. Dad had just gotten home from work. She was in the kitchen, talking low, but not low enough. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup. I did not interrupt. Some truths need space to step into a room. Lily swallowed. "She said you were using being lonely to make Dad feel guilty. She said you called too much, even though you barely call anymore. Then she said you were becoming a burden and that I needed to stop acting like you were some perfect grandmother." The clock above the pantry ticked once. Twice. I looked at the toast on my plate, cooling and untouched. I had imagined Claire saying unkind things about me. I had even prepared myself for that. But hearing it through Lily's mouth made it different. Smaller, sharper, harder to excuse. "What did your father say?" I asked. Lily stared at the table. Nothing at first. Then he said, "Claire, not now." That was all. Not no. Not do not speak about my mother that way. Not Lily loves her. Just not now. I folded my napkin slowly, corner to corner, because my hands needed something decent to do. Lily looked up at me then, and the hurt in her face was not only for me. It was for the father who had failed to become brave in the exact moment she needed him to. "Grandma," she whispered, "I think she has been keeping me from you." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. I did not promise everything would be fine. At my age, you learn not to insult pain with easy promises. I only said, "Then we will stop pretending we do not see it." After breakfast, Lily asked if she should call her father. She held her phone in both hands, staring at the dark screen as if it might decide for her. There were already 11 missed calls from Claire, 3 from Mark, and 1 message that Lily had not opened. I could see the fear sitting in her shoulders, making her smaller. 16 years old, and already learning how adults could turn love into pressure. I wanted to take the phone from her. I wanted to call Claire myself and ask what kind of mother made her own child feel guilty for hearing the truth. But I did not. Anger can feel righteous and still make a child stand in the middle of a fire she never started. So I poured Lily another glass of orange juice and said, "You can call when you are ready." Not before. She looked relieved, then ashamed of being relieved. I knew that look. I had worn it for years after saying no to people who expected my yes. While she showered upstairs, I carried her suitcase into the spare room, the one we still called Lily's room even though she had not slept there in nearly 2 years. The walls were pale yellow. The curtains had tiny blue flowers. On the dresser sat a ceramic rabbit she painted at the county fair when she was 9. One ear was chipped. I had kept it anyway. I changed the sheets, smoothed the quilt, and placed a clean towel at the foot of the bed. Ordinary things. Quiet things. The kind of care that does not announce itself. When Lily came in, her eyes moved around the room slowly. "You kept all this?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "You were never erased here." Her mouth tightened, and for a second I thought she might cry, but she only sat on the edge of the bed and touched the chipped rabbit with one finger. I left her there with the door half open and went downstairs to the kitchen. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. I took an old spiral notebook from the drawer where I kept grocery lists and church bulletins, then wrote the date at the top of the first page. Under it, I began listing everything I had brushed aside. The birthday invitation that never arrived. The Christmas package Lily never received. The school concert Claire said was canceled. The Sunday dinner moved without telling me. One memory led to another. Not loud memories. Polite ones. The kind dressed up as misunderstandings. By noon, the page was full. I sat back and looked at what I had written. It was not a diary. It was not a complaint. It was a map of how a grandmother gets slowly pushed out of her own family while everyone calls it normal. At 12:20, Claire arrived with a smile sharp enough to cut through the screen door. I saw her before she knocked, standing on my porch in a cream wool coat, her blonde hair brushed smooth, one hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup from the expensive place on Main Street. She looked less like a worried mother than a woman prepared for a meeting she intended to control. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. Her eyes flicked past me into the hallway, searching for Lily. Then her face softened in that practiced way I had watched for years, the way it softened whenever church ladies, neighbors, or Mark were close enough to witness it. "Evelyn," she said gently, "thank goodness. We have all been so worried." Not I was worried. We. A small word, but it put an invisible crowd behind her and left me standing alone. "Lily is safe," I said. "She had breakfast. She is resting." Claire gave a light laugh, the kind meant to make my seriousness look foolish. Teenagers can be so dramatic. She misunderstood a private conversation and ran straight here, which honestly concerns me. I did not move from the doorway. She heard what she heard. Claire's smile tightened. She is 16. 16-year-olds hear feelings, not facts. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of the stairs. Lily had come halfway down, wearing one of my old Ohio State sweatshirts, her hair pulled back, her face pale but steady. Claire's expression changed so quickly most people would have missed it. Warmth to warning. Mother to manager. "Lily Grace Whitmore," she said, still quiet, "get your things." Lily gripped the banister. "I do not want to go yet." The porch seemed to hold its breath. A pickup truck rolled slowly past outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice, then stopped. Claire looked at me then, and the sweetness drained from her eyes while her mouth kept smiling. "I hope you understand how inappropriate this is," she said. "A grandmother should not encourage a child to run from her own home." I stepped aside just enough so Lily could see me clearly, but not enough to invite Claire in. A grandmother should not teach a child to pretend her ears failed just to keep adults comfortable. For the first time, Claire had no ready answer. She looked over my shoulder at Lily, and I saw the old command trying to reach her. "Come now. Be quiet. Make this easier for me." But Lily did not move. She stood on the stairs in that oversized sweatshirt, small and trembling, yet more honest than any adult on my porch. Claire set her coffee cup on the railing with careful precision. "Fine," she said. "If this is how you want to play it, Evelyn, I will call Mark." I nodded once. "You should. He needs to hear this too." Mark arrived 20 minutes later in the blue pickup Richard had helped him buy after college, the same truck he once used to bring bags of mulch for my garden every April. I watched it pull to the curb and felt an old ache rise before I could stop it. Mothers remember boys even when men stand in front of them. Mark stepped out wearing his work jacket, his tie loosened, his face drawn with embarrassment more than fear. That told me something. He was not worried about what had happened. He was worried that it had become visible. Claire moved toward him before he reached the porch, speaking low and fast. I could not hear every word, but I saw his eyes lift to the upstairs window, then to me. He looked tired. Cornered. Familiar. "Mom," he said when he reached the steps, "this has gone far enough." I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because of how neatly he had placed the problem in my hands. Lily hearing cruelty was not the problem. Lily leaving home in the rain was not the problem. Claire standing on my porch turning truth into inconvenience was not the problem. Somehow I was. "Come inside," I said. "We can talk at the table." Claire hesitated, then followed Mark through the doorway as if entering my home was an act of generosity. Lily came down the stairs slowly and sat beside me at the kitchen table. Mark sat across from us. Claire remained standing near the counter, arms folded, her coffee cup still outside on the porch rail. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The refrigerator hummed. The old wall clock ticked. Ordinary sounds, holding up an extraordinary silence. Mark rubbed both hands over his face. "Lily, you scared us." Lily looked at him. "I was scared too." He blinked, as if he had not expected the sentence to come back at him. Claire sighed softly. "Honey, you misunderstood an adult conversation." "No, I did not," Lily said. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "You said Grandma was a burden." Mark looked down at the table. That small movement hurt more than denial would have. Claire turned to him sharply. "Mark, say something." He exhaled. "Lily, your mother was frustrated. She did not mean it like that." I folded my hands in my lap. "Then how did she mean it?" His eyes met mine for half a second, then slipped away. "Mom, please. Do not make this harder." There it was. The same sentence in a different code. "Be quiet. Be reasonable. Help us pretend." I looked at my son and remembered him at 7, standing in this same kitchen with muddy sneakers, promising he would always take care of me when he grew up. Children make promises with full hearts. Adults break them with tired voices. I did not raise my own. "Mark, when did keeping your wife calm become more important than telling the truth?" The room went still. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Lily's hand found mine under the table. Mark stared at the wood grain between us, and for the first time that day, he had no wife to hide behind and no excuse strong enough to cover him. Claire was the first to recover. People like her rarely stay silent for long because silence gives other people room to think. She placed both palms on the edge of my counter and laughed once, softly, as if the whole conversation had become embarrassing for everyone but her. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. "Everything becomes a trial in this house." Lily flinched, and I felt it through her fingers. Mark noticed too, but noticing is not the same as acting. Claire turned toward him, her voice smooth again. "Your mother is turning our daughter against us." Lily came here upset, and instead of bringing her home, Evelyn filled her head with adult problems. I looked at the notebook on the far end of the table. I had not planned to use it yet. I had planned to keep listening, because people reveal themselves best when they think they are winning. Claire continued, "We have been patient for years. We have adjusted every holiday, every weekend, every little family plan because Evelyn feels lonely. At some point, Mark, you have to admit this is unhealthy." That word landed carefully. Unhealthy. Not cruel. Not inconvenient. Not profitable for her to remove me. Unhealthy. It made concern sound like a weapon wrapped in tissue paper. Lily pulled her hand away from mine and stood up. "No," she said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Claire's eyes narrowed. "Sit down." Lily did not. She walked to the hallway, picked up her suitcase, and carried it back to the kitchen table. For a moment I thought she was leaving, and my chest tightened despite everything I had told myself about staying calm. But she laid the suitcase flat on the floor and unzipped it. Inside were not only clothes. There was a stack of envelopes tied with a purple ribbon, a small velvet box, and several folded pieces of paper. "I did not pack these last night," Lily said. "I have been keeping them in my closet." Claire's face changed. "Only a little." "Enough." Lily lifted the envelopes first. "Birthday cards from Grandma. Mom said they came late, or that Grandma forgot, but I found them in the cabinet above the laundry room." She placed them on the table one by one. My handwriting stared back at me. Lily at 12. Lily at 13. Lily at 14. Cards I had mailed with gift cards tucked inside, wondering why she never called to say thank you, then scolding myself for expecting too much from a child. Next came the velvet box. Lily opened it and took out the silver bracelet with a tiny maple leaf charm, the one Richard had helped me choose before he got sick. "She said this got lost in the mail," Lily said. Claire's lips parted. Mark stared at the bracelet as if it had risen from the bottom of a lake. Then Lily unfolded the papers. Printed messages. Screenshots. Little instructions dressed as motherly concern. "Do not tell Grandma about the recital. She will make it all about herself." Do not answer right now. She needs to learn boundaries. Tell her you are busy this weekend. Your father is stressed enough. I did not touch the papers. I did not need to. Their weight was already in the room. Claire reached for one, but Lily pulled it back. No, she said. You do not get to hide these again. Mark whispered his wife's name, but it sounded less like a question than the beginning of an answer he should have found years earlier. Claire did not apologize. She looked at the cards, the bracelet, the printed messages, and chose the one path that still left her standing above the rest of us. Those were taken out of context, she said. Mark looked up slowly. Birthday cards. His voice was quiet. Claire turned to him with the tired expression of a woman being forced to explain simple things to unreasonable people. I was trying to protect Lily. Your mother has always been emotionally intense. I did not want our daughter feeling responsible for an elderly woman's loneliness. Elderly woman. Not mom. Not Evelyn. Not grandma. An elderly woman. I felt Lily stiffen beside me, but my own mind had gone still in a colder way. There are moments when someone says exactly the wrong thing, and the room finally shows you where the truth has been hiding. Mark stood and walked to the sink, then turned back, as if the distance might help him understand his own life. Claire, why did you keep the bracelet? She folded her arms. Because it was too expensive. It made me uncomfortable. It was from my father too, he said. That was the first time Richard's name entered the room without me saying it. Claire's face tightened. Do not make this sentimental. I stood then, not quickly, because at 72 quick movements had become less important than deliberate ones. I gathered the cards and set them in front of Lily. These belong to you. Lily touched the ribbon as though it were something fragile and alive. Mark looked at me with a confusion that might have been grief if he had allowed it to mature. Mom, he said, why did you never tell me you sent all this? I looked at him for a long moment. Because every time I asked why Lily did not answer, Claire told me she was busy, and you told me not to take things personally. He looked down. There was nowhere else for his eyes to go. Claire reached for her purse. I am not staying here to be accused. No one is keeping you, I said. My voice sounded almost gentle, which seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. She looked at Mark, waiting for him to follow. He did not move right away. That pause was small, but Claire noticed it. So did I. She opened the back door instead of the front, stepping onto the little porch that overlooked the yard Richard and I had planted together. Through the glass, I watched her pull out her phone and begin typing with sharp, fast thumbs. Damage control. That was what she called truth when it escaped her hands. Inside, Lily sat down again, exhausted by her own bravery. Mark stayed by the sink, one hand braced on the counter, staring at the envelopes as if they were evidence from someone else's trial. I picked up my old spiral notebook and added 3 words beneath the list I had already made. Cards. Bracelet. Messages. The page no longer looked like memory. It looked like a pattern. And patterns, once seen clearly, are very hard to hide again. Claire came back inside 5 minutes later with a different face. Not softer. Not sorry. Better arranged. She had put her public expression back on, the one she wore at school fundraisers and church picnics, the one that made people trust her before she ever earned it. I think everyone needs time to cool off, she said. Lily, you will come home tonight. We can discuss consequences later. Lily looked at me, then at her father. Mark still stood by the sink, his eyes on the envelopes. For once, he did not answer for anyone. That silence was different from the one in the kitchen the night before. This one had a crack in it. Claire noticed and turned toward him. Mark. His name came out like a warning wrapped in silk. He looked at her slowly. Did you ask Mom about selling the house? The question landed so quietly I almost thought I had imagined it. Claire's posture changed. What? Mark opened his phone, scrolled, and held it out just enough for her to see. Last month. You sent me the link to that assisted living place outside Dayton. You said Mom would be happier there and that maintaining this house was not practical. My heart did not race. It sank steady and deep. I remembered that brochure arriving in my mailbox 2 weeks earlier, glossy and cheerful, full of smiling gray-haired couples beside flower beds. I had assumed it was junk mail. Claire lifted her chin. I was trying to plan responsibly. Your mother is alone in a 2-story house. My mother owns this house, Mark said. Dad made sure of that. Claire looked at me then, and for the first time all morning, I saw something unpolished behind her eyes. Not guilt. Calculation interrupted. I walked to the drawer beside the stove and took out the folder Richard had labeled in his careful block handwriting, house and legal papers. I had kept it there since the year after he passed, close enough to reach, though I had prayed I would never need it across from my own son. I set it on the table. The sound was small. Final. Richard and I paid off this house 8 years before he died, I said. It is in my name. Only my name. Claire gave another laugh, but this one did not. Hold. No one is trying to take anything from you, Evelyn. I opened the folder and placed the deed on top. Then no one should mind me calling Howard Bennett this afternoon. Mark looked at me. Dad's lawyer. Our lawyer, I said. Lily sat straighter in her chair. Claire's mouth tightened. She understood what the others did not yet. This was no longer about a cruel sentence overheard in a kitchen. It was about access, influence, control. I picked up my notebook and slid it beside the folder. Cards, bracelet, messages, assisted living brochure, house. The list was growing into something stronger than hurt. It was becoming a boundary, written in ink. Howard Bennett did not sound surprised when I called. That was the first thing that unsettled me. He listened without interrupting while I explained Lily arriving in the rain, the hidden cards, the bracelet, the messages, and the assisted living brochure. From the kitchen table, Mark watched me with both hands folded in front of him like a boy waiting outside the principal's office. Claire stood by the window, pretending not to listen while hearing every word. Lily sat beside me, tracing the purple ribbon around the stack of birthday cards. When I finished, Howard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Evelyn, I think you should come to my office today. Not next week. Not whenever convenient. Today. The words settled over the table like a dropped stone. Claire turned from the window. That is unnecessary, she said, though Howard could not hear her. I looked at her and spoke into the phone. What time? His office was above the old bank building on Main Street, 20 minutes from my house, with brass lettering on the door and a waiting room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. Richard and I had sat there years earlier signing the documents we thought would protect whichever one of us was left behind. I remembered Richard squeezing my hand under the conference table and whispering, just paperwork, Evie. Peace of mind. I had believed him. That afternoon, Lily came with me. Mark asked to come too, and I allowed it. Claire said she had calls to make, which meant she wanted time alone with her version of the story. Howard greeted Lily kindly, then placed a fresh legal pad in front of him and asked me to start from the beginning. I did. Slowly. Carefully. No exaggeration. No dramatic language. Just dates, events, objects, messages, and the quiet pattern connecting them. Howard took notes without changing expression. When I showed him the deed, he nodded. The house is yours. No one can force a sale without your consent. Mark shifted in his chair. I did not look at him. Howard continued, your medical directive still lists Mark as primary contact. Your financial power of attorney was never activated, but it should be reviewed. Your will is valid, but given what you have described, I recommend updating it immediately. Lily's hand found mine under the table. I felt how cold her fingers were. There is something else, Howard said. He opened a file and removed a printed note from his records. 3 weeks ago, someone called my office asking what steps would be necessary if an elderly homeowner could no longer manage her property. The room became very still. Mark's face drained of color. Who called? He asked. Howard looked at me, not him. The caller identified herself as Claire Whitmore. I did not cry. I did not gasp. I simply looked down at Richard's old folder on the table and understood that kindness had been mistaken for weakness only because I had let quiet people write my story for too long. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Howard had drawn 3 clean lines through the fog Claire had spent years building. The first was my house. It would remain mine, untouchable while I was alive, and after I was gone it would pass into a protected trust instead of falling into anyone's impatient hands. The second was my healthcare directive. Mark's name would no longer stand alone at the top like an unlocked door. My old friend Marjorie Ellis, who had known me since the church bake sale days and had never once mistaken quiet for confusion, would become my primary contact. Mark would be listed second, not as punishment, but as truth. Trust, I had learned, should match behavior. The third line was Lily. I asked Howard to set up an education trust for her, funded from the savings Richard and I had built slowly over 40 years of packed lunches, used cars, and vacations we postponed because family came first. Can Claire access it? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Howard looked at her kindly. No, not under the terms your grandmother is requesting. She lowered her eyes, and I saw relief pass across her face so quickly it nearly broke my heart. A child should not understand financial protection before she understands freedom, but there we were. Mark sat beside the window, one elbow on the arm of the chair, staring out at Main Street where cars moved past the courthouse and the pharmacy and the little diner where Richard used to order blueberry pie. Mom, he said finally, are you cutting me out? I turned toward him. He looked smaller than he had that morning. Not younger. Smaller. No, I said. I am cutting out confusion. He swallowed. I did not know she called Howard. I believe you. His eyes lifted, hopeful for one foolish second. I let the hope sit there long enough to become honest. But you knew enough to ask questions. You chose not to. The words did not land loudly. They did not need to. Howard slid the papers toward me, explaining each signature, each clause, each protection. My hand did not shake when I signed. Evelyn Margaret Parker. Again. 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 Each stroke felt less like losing a family and more like returning to myself. When we left the office, the late afternoon sun had turned the sidewalks gold. Lily walked beside me, holding the envelope with copies of the trust documents against her chest. Mark followed a few steps behind us. At the curb, he said, "What happens now?" I looked at my son, then at my granddaughter, then down Main Street toward the home Richard, and I had built one ordinary decision at a time. Now, I said, we stop letting Claire decide what the truth is. Claire was waiting on my porch when we got home, standing beneath the yellow light Richard had installed the summer Lily turned 6. Her car was parked crooked at the curb, and her face had the tight calm of someone who had spent the afternoon losing control and learning to call it concern. She looked first at Lily, then at the envelope in her hands, then at Mark standing behind us. "So this is what we are doing now?" she asked. No one answered quickly enough for her liking. I unlocked my front door and walked inside. Not away from her. Ahead of her. There is a difference. We sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where Lily had placed the hidden cards only hours earlier. This time, Howard's copies lay beside them. Claire reached for the envelope, but Mark stopped her with one quiet sentence. "Do not." It was the smallest word he had spoken all day, and the first one that sounded like a choice. Claire stared at him as if he had betrayed her, but I did not mistake one moment of courage for a repaired son. Mark had years of silence behind him, and silence leaves dents. "The house is protected," I said. "My medical directive has been updated. Lily's education trust is in place. You will not manage it, Claire. You will not touch it. You will not explain it away." Her face went pale, then red, then carefully blank. "You are making a terrible mistake." I folded my hands on the table. "No. I made the mistake when I believed being patient would make people kind." Lily sat beside me, straight-backed and quiet. She did not smile. This was not victory for her. Children do not celebrate when adults finally admit what they should have protected from the beginning. Mark looked at his daughter, then at me. "Mom," he said, "I am sorry." I let the words rest between us. They were not enough, but they were not nothing. "An apology is not a door," I told him. "It is a key. You still have to prove you know how to use it." Claire left first. No slammed door. No scene. Just the sharp click of her heels down my porch steps and the sound of her car starting too fast. Mark stayed a little longer, sitting with both hands around a glass of water he never drank. When he finally left, he hugged Lily carefully, as if asking permission without saying it. She allowed it. That was hers to decide. Weeks passed. Lily went home, but not the same way she had left it. She came to my house every Saturday. Sometimes Mark came alone on Wednesday evenings and fixed small things that did not need fixing. A loose cabinet hinge, a porch rail, the squeak in the back door. We did not pretend everything was healed. We simply stopped pretending it had never been broken. In April, Lily and I planted tulips behind the house where Richard used to kneel in the dirt with his old baseball cap on backward. She pressed the bulbs into the soil with serious concentration, then looked up at me and said, "Grandpa would have liked this." I looked at the yard, the porch, the windows glowing softly in the late afternoon sun. For years, I thought losing my place at their table meant I had lost my family. But that night, when my granddaughter came to my door with a suitcase, I learned the truth. Sometimes family is not the people who keep a chair empty for you. Sometimes it is the one person brave enough to leave the table and come find you.